All right. Here is a little video to help you guys with some of your conversions between different types of portions. So I'm just going to go over a few examples here for you. Make sure you come in and get some help if you have questions about them, because these are just going to be a couple examples each. So to go from decimals to fractions. Before we can go from decimals to fractions, we need to remember place value. So I gave you some examples here. I wrote the decimal 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I labeled each of the place values. So remember the first number after the decimal point, those are your tenths. The second after the decimal point are your hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and millionths. And it continues going like that, just like it does on the other side of the decimal point, right? So on the other side, we have tens and then we have hundreds. So on the decimal side, it's tenths and then hundredths. Remember, the pieces are getting smaller here. So I didn't continue at that point, but these would continue. So your steps to write a decimal as a fraction. The first thing you're going to do is say the decimal with place value. Remember, we're going to say it based on the last decimal in the number. So if I had this number right here, I would say this as 1,234, just like I would on the other side, but then I say the place value. So 1,234 10,000ths. Sorry, my lighting's a little bad right now. Or if I had this number right here, I would say 123 thousandths. That would be 12 hundredths. That'd be 1/10. Okay, so we say the decimal with place value. Then you're going to write that as a fraction. So what I just said when I said that with place value, those are fractions. Once you write it as a fraction, you're really good. But then at the third step, you should reduce it if possible. Always try to reduce your fractions if you can. So looking here, the first one, 0.12. This is, I'm going to say with place value. So this is 12 hundredths. We actually used that example already. So this is equal to 12 hundredths. Now I'm going to reduce it so I can think, what can I divide both 12 and 100 by? And when in doubt, one thing I like to do is if they're both even numbers, so 2 and 0 at the end, these are both even, I know I can always divide them both by 2. So that gives me 6/50. And when I did that, I noticed these are both even numbers still, so I actually could have reduced it by more. These were actually both divisible by 4. But I'm just showing you just in case you're not sure, because sometimes it's hard to see it. I can divide these both by 2 again. This is one way you can really work your fraction down. I think I'm actually going to do one in a moment like this too. And that would be 3/25. And I know that 3 and 25 don't have any other common factors. So that's going to be my most simplified version of 0.12 or 12 hundredths. All right, letter B. 0.003, we would say this as 3 thousandths. So I'm going to write this as 3/1000. And in this case, actually 3 thousandths, there are no common factors of 3 and 1,000, so we're just done. Letter C, let's try a big one here. This one's going to look a little messy, but I just want to show you what you can do with a nice big messy one. So this is 9,024. And the 4 is in the place of the 10,000s up here. So this would be 9,024 over 10,000. One thing you might notice is, no, actually, I don't want you to rely on that. Never mind. So let's just stick with this. So I don't know common factors of these two numbers because they're very big. But what I can do is I can keep dividing them both by 2. So what I'm going to do is each of these steps, I'm going to divide them by 2. I'm not going to actually show you that. I'm just going to write it. So, and I used a calculator for this. I did this before. So if I divide top and bottom by 2, I would get 4,512 over 5,000. Divide them both by 2 again. That would give me 2,256 over 2,500. I can divide them again by 2 because they're still even numbers. And I would get 1,128 over 1,250. And one last time I can divide them both by 2. And I get 564 over 625. But what I want to remind you is all of these fractions that we found are all equivalent fractions to this decimal right there. All right, on to our next portion conversion here. We're going to talk about going from percents to fractions. So I want to remind you here that percent means for every 100. So what a percent is it's really a ratio to 100. So when we say 54%, we're saying 54 out of every 100 or 54 to 100. Or as a fraction, 54 over 100. And guess what? That's exactly what we're going to do. To write a percent as a fraction, you're just going to write the percent over 100. Then you're going to need to use a giant 1 to eliminate any decimals. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And then reduce if possible. So let's start with a one that you might already know. So 25%. You might already know that this is 1/4, but you know, there's 4 quarters and $1. But let's do it anyways. So we would write this as 25 over 100. And I look for a common factor there. I know that 25 goes into both of these numbers evenly. And 25 goes into 25 once. It goes into 100 4 times. And that's how we can show that 25% is equal to 1/4. Now letter E, this is where that second step there about the giant 1 to eliminate the decimals is going to come into play. Remember, we can have decimals in percents. So 3.4%, that's fine, that's a percent. But I'm going to write exactly what this says over 100. So my first step is to put 3.4 over 100. Don't start moving decimals around yet. Now, I don't want a fraction with a decimal in it. So to get rid of the decimal there, I'm going to multiply by a giant 1. And what giant 1 am I going to multiply? Well, I want to move the decimal 1 spot over. So think for a second, how do I move a decimal point 1 spot over? What do I multiply by? Hopefully you're yelling at your computer right now. 10. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 10. That'll move the decimal over 1 spot. And that'll give me 34 over 1,000. Make sure you multiply both of them there. Now that's a fraction that's equivalent to 3.4%. But I'd like to reduce it because I know I can. So again, I'm going to keep using my even number step here. So as long as I know they're even numbers, I can divide them both by 2. When I do that, I come out to 17 over 500. And I'm pretty sure that 17 does not go evenly into 500. So I think that's as simple as we're going to get it. All right, here's another one here. Letter F, it's a lot of decimal in a percent. That was a little clunky the way I said that. But we have 0.005%. Or if we go back and we use our place value, we would say this as 5/1000ths of a percent. So remember to write exactly what the percent says over 100. Now we need to get rid of the decimal point. So I want to move the decimal 1, 2, 3 times over. So what am I going to multiply by? Well, I'm going to multiply with 1 and 3 zeros, which is 1,000. And we're going to do that on both parts. I move the decimal over 3 times. So that's going to give me 5 over 100,000. There's a comma there if anybody's interested. And now I'm going to divide both of these to simplify them. So both of these are divisible by 5. Divide them both by 5. And you're going to end up with 1 over 20,000. And that's the most simplified fraction you can write for, what do we say that was? 5/1000ths of a percent? Yeah. All right, last one for this video. Whoop. Fractions to percents. 2 methods I like to use here for fractions to percents. Method 1 is one that I feel like a lot of students are dependent on, and if this one works, this is a nice one to use first. That's why I'm showing it to you first. The problem is it doesn't always work. It can be hard to use in some fractions. So, if the denominator can easily go into 100, I use a giant 1 to make the fraction over 100. The numerator is the percent. So let's look at what that looks like. If I have 6 over 25, I can make this over 100 by multiplying both of these by 4 over 4. That's a giant 1 there. 6 times 4 is 24. 25 times 4 is 100. And like we said, percents are per 100. So my numerator here, 24 over 100, that's my percent. Once you can get a fraction over 100, the numerator is just, that's it. Now, letter H I wanted to show you because sometimes the number doesn't go in evenly, but it's still easy one. It's an easy one to do. Like I can do this one mentally in my head. And the reason for that is I know, even though 40 doesn't go evenly into 100, I know that if I multiply 40 by 2.5, it's going to make 100. So I'm going to do that on both top and bottom. And this is honestly one I would just do in my head. So this is 100. 2.5 times 1 is just 2.5. I'm going to switch that to its decimal, so 2.5. And then now that number on the top, we know that 2.5% is equivalent to 1 over 40. Make sure you keep the decimal there. There are decimals in percents. So you can have parts of percents. And just in case, because we're going to review this again tomorrow, but in case you forgot, to make the 1/2 into 0.5, I just divided 1 by 2. All right. Now, that doesn't always work really easily, right? Because sometimes we have fractions where it's harder to make them into 100. Like 3, it's really hard to make 3 go into 100. 8, you actually can do it, but I wanted to show you one that was a little more. You might not see that right away. Excuse me. So, to convert this fraction to a decimal, we're going to do it, well, to convert this fraction to a percent, first we're going to convert your fraction to a decimal by dividing. We did a little bit of that a couple weeks ago, so hopefully you remember that. Then convert your decimal to a percent by multiplying by 100. So let's see what that looks like. So first of all, 3/8. This is a division problem. This is 3 divided by 8. When I do 3 divided by 8, I am going to come up with 0.3. Oh, whoops. I said the right number. 0.375. That's my decimal equivalent for 3/8. To make this into a percent, I have to multiply this by 100 because percents are out of every 100. Another way I think about that is 0.375 is out of 1, right? This is comparing to 1. Percents are compared to 100, so we have to multiply it by 100. And what that actually does is it just moves the decimal over. So sometimes students just say, oh, I just moved the decimal over twice. The only reason I remind you to multiply by 100 is it reminds me what direction to move the decimal point. So it's going to be 37.5%. Okay, and one more. Let's try that method. I want to show you one with a fun decimal here. So 2/3. This is 2 divided by 3. As some of you may know, when you divide 2 by 3, you get a repeating decimal. And we were talking about how to write repeating decimals in the past. Remember, we'd write this as 0.6 repeater. We just need one number and then the bar if that's all that's repeating. Now, if this was like 2/7 repeater, you'd have to write 2/7 in a bar. Anyways, so what I want you to remember about this means 0.66666. Goes on forever. Now, again, we're going to use that method that we just talked about. I'm going to multiply it by 100. But what you want to be careful here is you got to remember there are more 6s. So what helps me is I will sometimes write out, I'm going to write the original 0.6666. I'll write some of the decimal points, right? It's going to keep going. When I multiply by 100, I move the decimal 2 spots over. So now it's here. So my work's a little messy here, but that means I have 66 point. But what's going to happen after this point? Those 6s are going to continue to go on forever. So that's going to be 66.6 repeater percent. It's really important that you have that repeater percent. We don't need to round. You can just include the repeater bar there, and you'll be okay. If we do any of these on a formative, I'll make you, I'll give you the show your work option so that you can write the bar in your writing. Because I know I actually don't know if the student side lets you do the bar. It lets me do the bar on the teacher side, but maybe not the student side. All right. So that was a very quick review of these. In class, we'll go over it more, but this is kind of to help those of you that might have missed it in class. If you have any questions, always come to distance learning support, and good luck with this stuff.